Welcome everybody to Parshat Vayakhel 5782. I'll be your host. No, so it's a beautiful parsha. It is usually thought of. It's usually doubled up together with Pekude, and it's not always, but sometimes it is Parshat Shekalim, as it is this year. Very important Maftir and Haftarah, the beginning of the holiday season, the four parshiot, beginning with Shkalim and leading into the time of our redemption in Pesach. So this is really the beginning of the holiday season in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of symbolism, obviously, to it. I hope somebody speaks about something like that on Shabbat. Uh, but the parsha is often thought of as basically a repetition of the previous parshiot, Truma, Tetzaveh. In fact, in some ways, Rav Hirsch points out it's not just repeated; it's repeated twice in this week's parsha. All the details of how the Mishkan is built and all the materials and how big and everything. It's a little much, and there has to be a reason for it. And Rav Hirsch, of course, and many others give lots of reasons for it. The main thing to remember is that there's a lot of symbolism in it. And whenever you're dealing with symbolism, you're going to have to deal with details, right? You read a book, right? Let's say back in the day, people used to read books. So you read a book, fiction book, lahavdil, to nothing like the Torah, right? It's a fiction book, and there's a description of the weather. It was a dark and stormy night, right? So already that something is being alluded to. There's some sort of the author wants to lead towards something. With the images that you're conjuring up when you're thinking of dark and stormy night, it has something to do with whatever is going to happen in the action of the story. Unless it doesn't, unless all of a sudden it's a dark and stormy night and dad brought birthday cake for dinner. And so, and then he got in trouble and got killed. He got, so,
Oh dear.
oh dear. So that would fit with the dark and stormy night. But usually that's how things work. You want to allude to things in your writing. So every single detail, the darkness, the storminess, all of it is symbolic of something, is representative of something. It's supposed to give you ideas about something. And that's exactly what the Torah wants to do as well. And more importantly, says Rav Hirsch, you need to know that the people who were building it were thinking things while they were building it. They weren't just like, oh, I feel like doing an art project today. Let's, sew some goat hair together. That's not what was going on. There was a lot of kavanah that was very intentionally placed and very important, and it's the reason why kavanah and intent is so important in the Mishkan, in the workings of the Mishkan, and it's why it's so important in Shabbat and all the rules of Shabbat that we learn in this week's parsha and elsewhere. Fall into the same idea of like having intent, knowing what you're doing. That sort of thing. So we'll get to that probably in other years, but that's just sort of a beginning of an introduction to the parsha. But now we're going to do what we like to do best or most, and that is do a deep dive into the parsha, go straight into the sources, and see what we can learn from the verses themselves. Suffice it to say, I like to say this. I've said it many times, and I'll probably say it again. There's a reason why we have to learn the verses themselves in the original, in the Hebrew. And that is because there's a lot of interpretation. There's a lot of commentary, and there's a lot of tradition to how we understand a verse or how we understand the Torah at all. If you're just going to read in English translation, so somebody translated it following a certain path, a certain commentary. Let's say it's Rashi, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just know that you're limited. You don't have the entire all the opinions of everything that it could mean. So let's see how that works. For instance, here, the verse in 35:10. This is the beginning of the parsha. It says, "V'chol chacham leiv bachem," all of them who had wisdom in their heart, Yavo v'yasu et kol asher tzivah Hashem. They went and did everything Hashem commanded. Right? They got the command. Hashem told them how to build the Mishkan. He might have repeated how to build the Mishkan. And here the people go and do it. There was a verse way, way earlier on, back in Parshat Yitro, verse 18:13, where it said, very similar phrase. It says, Vayhi memacharat v'yeshev Moshe lishpot et ha'am. And it was the next day. This is after the day after Yitro arrived in the camp. And it says, V'yeshev Moshe lishpot et ha'am, and Moshe sat and judged the people. V'yamod ha'am al Moshe, and the people were sitting around Moshe. Min haboker v'ad ha'erev, from morning until evening. And we already discussed back then in Parshat Yitro about why Moshe did this, and how Yitro criticized him, because after all the people are going to get anxious. They're not getting their questions answered quickly enough, etc. Okay, so the Rashi says over there, V'him macharat, and it was the next day. So just so you're very clear what the next day was, Rashi tells us, Motzei Yom HaKippurim Haya. This was the day after Yom Kippur. So it wasn't the day after Yitro came, like I originally said. It was actually a few days maybe later, a couple of days, whatever. It was, or maybe a bit later after Yitro came, that this was happening. It was Motzei Yom Kippur. Oh goodness. And do you guys hear that? Anyway.
No, what happened?
Oh no, it sounds like there's like 1,000 dogs outside barking at each other, yelping at each other. Anyway, not important. All right, so Kach Shaninim B'Sifri. So it says, he brings a proof. It's a pretty long Rashi, actually, unusually long Rashi over there in Yitro, talking about what day this was. But it's very clear from the very, very beginning, first few words, Motzei Yom Kippurim Haya. It was the day after Yom Kippur. Okay? So by the way, in case you haven't figured this out yet, when was the Torah given?
Shavuos.
Thank you. Yes, Shavuot. Okay, so we have Yitro coming, and the whole parsha of Yitro of the 10 Commandments, etc., happened at the end of Yitro. That's the Shavuot, and this is after Yom Kippur. So is this the next Yom Kippur, or is this, or what are we talking about here? What's going on here? So it seems again that Rashi, as is typical of Rashi, is saying that Torah is not going in chronological order. And what happened was, first Yitro came, and then the 10 Commandments were given, and then later on, many days later, after Yom Kippur, like a few months after Yitro came and got the Torah and everything else, not that he got the Torah, but he was with the Jewish people when they got the Torah. So many months later, Moshe was sitting judging the people, and that's when Yitro gave his advice. That seems to be the flow. Unless Yitro came before, it became after the Torah was given. Anyway, whatever that was. So anyway, that's Rashi. The important thing is that this event where Moshe is judging the people is after Yom Kippur, and it proves it through the Midrashim, etc., etc. Now back to our parsha. Sorry, this is the long Safari translation of the Rashi there. All right, so back to our parsha. So in 35:1, right? Vayakhel Moshe, and Moshe gathered. It says here, L'macharat Yom Kippurim. This was the day after Yom Kippurim. Kishiyared minahar, when he came down from the mountain. So I have the wrong verse here. That's what I just realized. This shouldn't be 35:11. Should be 35:1. That's what I did. 35:10. It should be 35:1. Sorry. So the pasuk tells us, Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Moshe gathered the entire Jewish people. And so the Rashi there says, Vayakhel, he gathered the Macharat Yom Kippurim. This is the day after Yom Kippur. because that's when he came down from the mountain. Remember the process here. Moshe went up to the mountain on Shavuot time, stayed there 40 days and 40 nights, received the Torah, was on his way back down when he came and saw that the Jews were worshiping the golden calf. That was the 17th of Tammuz. He broke the luchot, prayed for the Jewish people to be forgiven. Eventually, they were forgiven. And Moshe went back up the mountain, 40 days and 40 nights, came back down. When did he come back down? He came back down with the second set of luchot on Yom Kippur. So the next day was the day that Moshe gathered the people together to build the Mishkan. Okay? That's what Rashi says. That's all fine and dandy, you'll say, but there's one problem. You remember the problem?
Didn't the people dance around the golden calf like on Tisha B'Av time?
Yes, the
No.
17th of Tammuz, yes.
Right, so it wouldn't be near
Right.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur is when they were forgiven, and then Moshe brought the new luchot
Oh,
down.
you're saying the second?
Right.
Okay,
So,
cool.
but the question I wanted you to ask was based on the Rashi I quoted earlier. What was Moshe doing on the day after Yom Kippur? We already have that. So either he was gathering the people, like it says. Shoot. Either he was gathering the people as this pasuk tells us. I'm sorry. I apologize. All right. So again, the Rashi earlier in Yitro told us that Moshe gathered the people together. He was teaching them the laws. He was judging the people. And that's when Yitro told him, you shouldn't be doing this. The people shouldn't be standing around you all day and all night waiting for judgment. And then the Rashi here is saying that Moshe is telling the people how to build a Mishkan the day after Yom Kippur. Make up your mind, Rashi. It's only one day. It's the day after Yom Kippur. They should be busy building their sukkah right now, buying their Abba Minim. What's Moshe doing? Either he's gathering the people with instructions about building the Mishkan, or he's judging the people, telling them who did what, and et cetera, et cetera. Right? Good question. You hear the question? Rashi seems to be contradicting himself. So comes along the Kli Yakar and explains it all. So first he quotes the Rashi in Yitro like we did. Then he quotes this Rashi here, what he was doing Macharat Yom Kippurim. He's teaching the people how to build the Mishkan. B'nirali, he says, it seems to me, Sheyadua Shakahal Zeh Hayahodiu Lahem Mitzvot HaMishkan. They already knew the laws of the Mishkan, V'hanadava, and the promises, Kemoshi Bar, the Samoch, as is explained close by. Vaya Moshe Choshesh Pen Yidnadav Echad Mehem Lemashken Dava She'enu Shelo. So Moshe was concerned, maybe somebody here is going to donate something. He's going to make he's going to make a pledge of something that doesn't really belong to him or her. So what do? Right? You can't accept it. It doesn't belong to you, but it's going to be stolen merchandise. You can't have stolen merchandise, build the Mishkan. So what do? Says Moshe, I know what to do. I need to teach them right and wrong. I need to judge the cases. I need to show them how law works, how ownership works, so that nobody's going to donate something that doesn't belong to them. So that the Mishkan will not be built on stolen merchandise. We're not going to have we had this, the name came up, unfortunately, in the news recently again. It's not going to be a Madoff building. It's going to be the Mishkan is going to be kosher money from kosher sources, There's not going to be any questions about ownership and anything else. So the first thing we have to do is have the court cases. But it's a long day, Baruch Hashem. We have time for other things too. After the court cases and after everybody sees what really belongs to whom and what everybody can give and what they shouldn't give, now I can say, this is what I need you to bring to me. And then they're going to bring the right stuff. That's how the Kli Yakar clears up these Rashis. Yes, they're both right. Rashi's right both times. This is a very important event when the Jewish people were being judged by Moshe day and night, and Yitro gave the idea of having a court system where Moshe doesn't have to do everything all by himself. Was that same day that Moshe was telling the people how to build the Mishkan? Just doesn't seem that way to us because it's so many parshiot ago. It's it's almost 20, it's 15 chapters behind, right? So we sort of forgot about that incident. But now we have to remember because Torah is all encompassing that way. Okay, so that's how we're going to start off today, and I'll try to remember to fix that in the source sheet if you ever want to use that. That should be 35:1, not 35:10. All right, 35:2, very next pasuk. Sheshit yamim ta'aseh malacha v'yom hashvi'i yelachem kodesh Shabbat Shabbaton la'Hashem kol ha'oseh b'malacha yumat. So one of the very first laws you need to know about building the Mishkan is the fact that 6 days you should work. We have a very strong work ethic. It's important to work for 6 days. On the 7th day, Yelachem Kodesh, it should be holy. Shabbat Shabbaton LaHashem. It's a Sabbath of Sabbaths to Hashem. It's a Shabbaton. Hashem's having a Shabbaton. Anybody who does work on this day is going to get the death penalty. Very serious. So yes, build the Mishkan, work hard. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, work until you drop, and then Shabbat, drop everything, right? You don't work. So that was a very important lesson. That's where one of the sources that we have for the laws of Shabbat come from this week's, the beginning of this week's parsha. In fact, I don't want to make too big of a deal about it because it's not what I'm really prepared to speak about right now. But it's worth remembering that there are 39 malachot of Shabbat, 39 categories of forbidden work on Shabbat, and all of them come from this work in this week's parsha of building the Mishkan. All 39 things that you can't do on Shabbat have to do something with building the Mishkan. Okay, very good.
Oh yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm confused. People on Shabbos were able to do everything, and then we weren't able to do any of that stuff that was in the Mishkan, or during the week. You don't. Did I make sense?
I'm not sure what your question is. Are you asking whether you're allowed to build the Mishkan on Shabbat?
No. I always thought that like the 39 malachot were done in the Mishkan / Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos. But like outside.
Yes, that's a separate thing. That's not where we learned the concept of malacha from. Malacha doesn't come from the fact that they did malacha in the Beit HaMikdash. They did the sacrifices and stuff like that. That's true. They did. In some ways, certain laws of Shabbat were how do you say did not need to be kept in the actual Beit HaMikdash. But that's not relevant to this right now. We're talking about the building of the Mishkan. All the laws of building the Mishkan, that could not be done on Shabbat. You had to stop work. You could not build the Mishkan on Shabbat. And that's where we get all the laws of Shabbat really come from that work that you couldn't do on Shabbat for the Mishkan. Okay? That's the only thing that's called work. That's the only thing that's called this malacha, not avoda, but malacha. And again, other commentaries from First and others comment on the fact that there's a difference between the two. Avoda means any kind of work, right? And malacha means creative work, making something that didn't exist before in some way. How that works with carrying is a different issue. We're not going to get into that now. Like I said, not really prepared to speak about that right now. But I do want to talk about this very interesting phrase. It says here, one of the words here, one of the phrases here is Kodesh Yelachem kodesh. It should be holy for you. How is it supposed to be holy for you? It doesn't give any hint in the verse what that means. Like Shabbat is holy. What does it mean holy for you? Like you have to take it personally somehow. This isn't business. It's personal. So what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to keep Shabbat holy? It doesn't really say, right? It just says don't do work. So either work and holiness are not somehow mutually exclusive, which doesn't make sense because all of this work is to build something holy, the Mishkan, or it means something completely different. So Rav Sternbach in Tam Vedat says it means something completely different. Lachem Kodesh, it should be for you holy. Hachova al kol echad lekadesh et Shabbat. There's an obligation for everybody to make Shabbat holy. Af, even ba'achila, even in how you eat. How you eat on Shabbat should be different than how you eat other days of the week. Now, that doesn't mean not just necessarily that you eat gefilte fish when you wouldn't eat gefilte fish during the week, assuming you eat gefilte fish on Shabbat. It doesn't mean a specific kind of food. It's talking about how you eat. Dressed up, so you can be dressed up during the week. What's special? So let's see what he says. Ki ba'achilato hakadusha mikadesh hu et Shabbat. With holy eating, you make Shabbat holy. Again, with holy eating, you're making Shabbat holy. Ubeperish Rabbeinu Yonah, in the commentary of Rabbeinu Yonah on Pirkei Avot, I think. I'm pretty sure. Ktav tam chadash lemitzvot sudat shlishit. He gives a new reason for sudat shlishit. This is going to be something. This is going to be mind blowing. You're going to hear a whole new answer to why we have sudat shlishit at all, right? And this is not a brand new answer for most people because it's from Rabbeinu Yonah, right around the time of the Rambam, right? So good 1,000 years ago or so. So it's not really a new answer, but it's going to be new for you because I'm pretty sure you haven't heard this before. He says, "Ki chayavuhu bezel lechalek achilato shelo yachol besudato achila gasa." You get into Sudat Shlishit, and here's what happens. A lot of people skip it altogether. Why? Because they're full from lunch. Now, there's an obligation on Shabbat. It's very clear. It's in Halacha, it's in the Midrash, it's in the Gemara, that you have to have 3 meals on Shabbat. You have to. What people do if they don't, I'm not going to get it. If they can't, okay, that's a different topic. A little bit related to that topic is what we're about to hear. The first meal is Friday night. You have to have a Friday night meal. The second meal is Shabbat morning. Some people do it at breakfast time. Most of us in America do it lunchtime. And then you have to have a Sudat Shlishit. You have to have a third meal. Now, this is winter, say, right? In some places it's winter. And what happens is you ate your lunch, you were done at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, 2:30, and then you have to go to shul, and then Sudat Shlishit has to be eaten by what, 5? You just ate. You just finished at 2:30. How do you eat Sudat Shlishit? It's going to be achila gasla. It's going to be overeating. You shouldn't do that. So, you're going to waste a lot of time with eating, and you won't have any time to learn Torah. So what you should do is before and then you have to have this other meal. The first meal, really second meal, lunchtime, eat a little bit levad. To satisfy your soul, to satisfy yourself. V'kovish et yitzro, and fight your yetzer hara. Kishemistapek v'achilatozu, so that you don't overdo it in that particular eating. V'yashuk b'Torah, and then learn Torah, ve'achar kach yosef od, and then go back and eat more, achol sudah shlishit, and then go eat sudah shlishit. Here's what he's saying. He's saying you can make Shabbat holy by making it a completely holy day. And one of the ways, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, that Chazal and the Torah helps you do that is by creating Sudah Shlishit. How? Because ordinarily, if there wasn't a Sudah Shlishit, if there was just a lunch and then you're not going to eat for a long, long time, so you're going to pack it in. Here's lunch. You're going to eat like there's no tomorrow. You're going to eat, cholent, cook, everything. Just going to vacuum it all up. And then, right, bench. Then it's already late. Maybe you have a time for a 20-minute power nap, and then you meander off to mincha, and then everybody else goes to eat sudah shlishit. You take a nap or look things over, but you're not really learning intensely. You're not osek b'Torah. Come along, the rabbis. Comes along the Torah and says, no, you need to have a third meal. By putting that third meal there, it sort of gives you a benchmark, right? You need to eat there. So you're going to have to eat less at lunch. And by eating less at lunch, what does that give you? Gives you a lot more free time between lunch and Sudah Shlishit to learn Torah like you're supposed to. And that's how you make Shabbat holy. That's an amazing thought. He's giving you advice about how to make it so that you can eat your Sudah Shlishit. But not only that, he's giving you a reason for Sudah Shlishit. It all fits together. He says more on the subject, but let's leave it at that for now. But the idea, I think, is tremendous. That your job, as the pasuk tells us, it says, Yeh lachem kodesh. It should be holy for you. That's right. You need to make it holy because it's a holy day from Hashem's perspective. It should be holy from your perspective. And the way that you make it holy is by your behavior on this day. It's not supposed to be just a day to sleep or read books or whatever else. It's a day to really study. It's a day to really learn. It's an amazing opportunity. You don't have time during the week. You're working, you're schlepping, you're this, you're that, and all of a sudden you have Shabbat. It's your chance to really tighten your belt and learn with real pleasure and real depth. Okay. All right, let's go further. Right, so that's Tam V'dat. Baruch Hashem. All right, so we go to, now remember, this parsha is really kind of short, so we're going to spend most of our time, if not all, on, I think almost all of our time today, on chapter 35, right? So that was 35 verse 2. Now we're skipping a few verses to 35 verse 5. 35:5. It says, K'chu mi'itchem truma la'Hashem, kol nediv libo v'yavieha et trumat Hashem, zahav v'chesed v'nechoshet. Take from yourself gifts to Hashem. Everyone whose heart is so moved shall bring them. Gifts for Hashem, gold, silver, and copper. So, our Gadol Hador, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita, live and be well, in Tam Dikra, directs us towards a Ramban. We're not going to look at the Ramban right now, but suffice it to say, he's going to basically summarize it for us. Ayin Ramban, so he says, Lama kol parshat Mishkan. So he asks, why is this? Why do we need to repeat the whole story of the Mishkan here? B'kitzur she'asu kol asher tziva Hashem v'ayin sham ma shetiritz. And he says, look over to see what he answers. But he has his own answer. So this is Rav Chaim telling us why exactly it is that we have this parsha of Vayakhel, which is basically a summary, more or less, of parsha Truma. So he says, ובאמת המעין ירק שכמעט בכל פסוק יש שינויים ממה שנאמר בציווה בפרשת תרומה תצווה. So really there are differences in how this parsha is written versus how Truma was written. V'ayin la'el al perush Zohar HaKadosh Reish Vayakhel. In the beginning of Vayakhel is the Zohar. It says Shebetchila Ne'amar me'et kol ish ish ve'acher masa ha'egel achar masa ha'egel Ne'amar k'chu mi'itchem ayin sham. The Torah tells the Jewish people to give donations from every man whose heart motivates him. Kol ish, right? It says, "Shkol shenuim ha'ela utzruchu achar masa ha'egel lifnei kain hutzrach hakol liyot b'ofen acher k'tzat." And so his answer, the reason why it's a little bit different, is because the Jews themselves were somehow diminished after the sin with the golden calf. They weren't themselves anymore. They were a little bit lesser of themselves, and so they're on a new level, a lower level, and so now the command has to come back to them again, but in a different language, somewhat different explanations, somewhat different verses, somewhat different order, because it's a new reality. Now, this is very important for us because I'll give you an example of something that's repeated quite often, something that as a rabbi I hear often as well. Even the question is repeated, and that is that davening. Davening is repeated. Right? It's a question I get all the time. Why do I have to say the same thing over and over and over again? And sometimes it's a particular verse. Melech Yanein of Yom Kippur. Hashem answers us on the day we call. How many times does Hashem need to hear that before he answers us? Either he's going to answer you or he's not going to answer you. Saying it 3, 4, 5 times every morning isn't going to change anything, is it? So the answer is like what Rav Chaim said, and this is the answer that you hear from a lot of other places, Abu Racham, amongst others, is that the whole point of tefillah, and Rav Hirsch, the whole point of tefillah is to introspect and to think about where you're holding in terms of your connection with Hashem. That being the case, each time you say a phrase, you are now on a different level than when you said it before. Even if you said it before, the last time you said it was 5 minutes ago, it doesn't matter. Even 5 seconds ago, you are now a different person. You said it, now you're growing, hopefully. You're thinking about what you're saying, you're becoming elevated. And as you become elevated, there's a whole new reality being opened to you, a whole new world, as a particular cartoon once sang about, right? So here we have the same thing. Hashem, on purpose, had to give the Jewish people these commands again, because now they are a different Jewish people. For better, or in this case, for worse, they're no longer on the level that they were on before Chet HaEgel, before the sin of the golden calf in last week's parsha. So the parsha before that, Truma Tetzaveh, those parshiot where we got the commandments of the commands, the laws of how to build the Mishkan, no longer apply to this group of people, not in the same way. So it has to be given to them in a different way, in a way that they'll better understand it, a way that and in each one of these examples, that there's a difference or a change, each one of them has a commentary on its own. But this is just a general picture. Just generally, I want you to understand that each one of them altogether have reasons and reason. Reasons and intent. All right, so let's go on a little bit further. Chapter 35, verse 10. So a whole, oh, look at that. We had 35:10 before. Yeah, we had it by accident, remember? So
Is it like
uh
35:1?
yeah, this is actually 35:10. So it's the one we're supposed to do. All of them who were wise of heart went and did what Hashem commanded. Says the Rebbe Rav Bunam, also known as Rav Simcha Bunam of Pshischa, sorry. Always hard to say that. And I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of small, but it says Kohach Amlev, and I got this from the book B'Shem Omro, very nice set. It says there, everybody who is wise of heart, V'yasu et kol asher tziva Hashem, and they all did what Hashem says. I wish this phrase was on a bumper sticker. Listen to what he says. This beautiful short phrase. Hachachma ha'amitit, true wisdom he la'asot et kol asher tziva Hashem, to do everything Hashem commanded. What is wisdom? This pasuk is telling us the definition of wisdom. So you think you have like a wise person, Albert Einstein, okay? So he was smart. He knew, math, physics, etc. A couple other things here and there along the way. I'm pretty sure he knew some chemistry. Okay, so what was he? Is he the Torah's definition of wise, though? Yes, he's smart, but smart isn't the same as wise. So you might have an argument, and oftentimes I do, with people who are, I think, in some ways much smarter than me, but they don't have wisdom. They don't have the Torah's wisdom. I have a little bit of the Torah's wisdom, barely enough of the Torah's wisdom is what I have. And when we argue Torah, my only chance is the wrong word. My only superiority, I guess, my only
Option.
I'm looking for a word like superiority, but not superiority. My only advantage, that's the word, advantage. My only advantage over such a person is the fact that I'm trying to keep the mitzvot. I'm trying to listen to Hashem in the things that I do. Because listening to Hashem, that is wisdom. Again, look at the verse. And everybody who was wise of heart, Yavo, they went, and what did they do? V'yasu et kol asher tziva Hashem. So the Rav Rabbunim is reversing this verse, right? What is it that made them a chacham leiv? It's because they did kol asher tziva Hashem. You want to be wise? Do what Hashem says. It's that simple. This is the formula. Again, real true wisdom, la'asot et kol asher tziva Hashem, to do everything Hashem commanded. Blitach hitachot. No, I have to. I can't even see it. Hachmot. No arguments, no deviations. Do exactly what Hashem said, and that's what's going to make you a wise person. All right. Skip along 12 verses to chapter 35, verse 22. It says there, Vayavo hanashim al hanashim, and the man came. It says al hanashim, which means usually on the women, right? Safaria, so like a blanket translation, men and women. All right, men and women came. Kol nadiv lev, everybody who dedicated their heart. Heviu chach v'nezem v'tabat v'chumas kol kli zahav v'chol ish asher heinif t'nufada zachav la'Hashem. So they all came. This is when they finally come, and they bring all the stuff for the Mishkan. All kinds of gold, brooches, earrings, rings, pendants, gold objects of all kinds of jewelry. That's what the men and women brought. So we have a little bit of a problem. The problem is that phrase that I sort of stumbled on, and actually not by accident. Ve'avo hanashim al hanashim. The men came on top of the women. That doesn't make sense. That's not a normal way to speak. Very unusual phrase. So says this forno. Right? Ve'avo hanashim al hanashim. It says im hanashim. They came with the women, together with them. Amid nadavot, the ones who were giving these donations. Bo hanashim, together with them came the men. Shalahem lehaskim benidava, to give their permission for this gift. Ooh, why? Why do you need the man's permission? Because there's a Gemara. There's a Gemara in Bava Kama 119a, if you want to look it up, that because unless otherwise written down in a document, all of the women's possessions are the man's possessions too. They have a joint account. So she's going to donate her stuff, and if it's a valuable thing, the man needs to have his say also. There's actually halachot about this, that you can't, a person, even a collector, goes into a house or stands outside the house and asks for a donation. If the woman gives a donation that's excessive, and he's not allowed to take it. He's supposed to wait to find out from her husband, assuming she's married. Otherwise, it's not a problem. But he needs to find out from her husband if that's okay. So that's why it says.
Expensive?
Sorry.
Only if it's expensive.
Well, yeah, you can give. Women can give donations to tzedakah without their husband's permission if it's a
Like what's expensive and what's not, like depending on the
that
person.
we're gonna get into halacha here, which is I'm not really prepared to speak about right now, but it's if you it's expensive, right? I'm sure you have in your family, you and your husband. I'm sure if you gave $5 for tzedakah, I don't know if that's expensive for you. $20, $100, whatever would be unusually large amount. That's something you should probably consult each other about before giving a donation. Anyway, there is I'm sure there's psak halach about how much is this amount nowadays. Like I said, that's not I'm not prepared to speak about that right now. As mentioned before, I don't know that much. But back to this though. So the anashim came with the nashim. They came. It says al hanashim. So it says forno. The reason they came on the women was because they came together with them, with their authority over them, in a sense. Not that they owned them, obviously, but they had some sort of authority over them, where they had to allow them to give these donations, which they all did. Obviously, they wouldn't have. The women wouldn't have come with these donations if the husbands wouldn't have allowed it. But they needed to make sure that Moshe knew, and Bezalel knew, or whoever was going to work with it knew that these donations were given with their approval. Shikidei shikablu geveim mehen, so that the Gabayim could take from them, so they could make the collections. She'ein mekablim min hanashim ela devar muat. They can only take from women only small amounts, and this is not small. This is jewelry. This is gold. This is very expensive stuff. Right. So that is that is this forno's opinion. So what does it mean? Nashim al hanashim. Anashim al hanashim. That the men came over the women. It means that they had authority over their expenditures, and they allowed the women to bring it. So that's why it mentions them in this weird way. Chidush Harim has a different answer, And I find this answer so amazing, so so simple, and yet, why didn't I think of this? Yavo ha'anashim al hanashim, the men came over the women. Ita b'makom shabalat shuva omdim ein tzadikim gemurim yacholim la'amod. In a place where a Baal Teshuvah stands, we've mentioned this before in different contexts, even a person who is a perfectly righteous person cannot stand in the same place. The Baal Teshuvah is so much higher. What does that have to do with anything? Hanashim shechatu b'zahav ba'egel bo b'chila sagi al hanashim shelo chatu. You usually think, the women were amazing during the Chet HaEgel, during the golden calf. They didn't sin at all. They're wonderful. They're amazing. They're tzaddik, they're tzidkaniot. They're so amazing. It's so terrific. Says Kedush Arim. That's true. It's true. Baruch Hashem, they didn't sin. But they also didn't do teshuvah because they didn't have to. The men did. So during the Chet HaEgel, before the teshuvah, yes, the women were way, way, way above the men. They weren't sinning. The men were sinning. But after the sin, the men who did teshuvah are al hanashim. They're above the women. They grew. Teshuvah is that powerful that you could become a greater person because of the sin that you did, and the teshuvah that you made afterwards gives you the impetus, gives you the springboard to become greater than you were before. The men did teshuvah, they're on a higher level. And that's what it means, ha'anashim al hanashim. Yes, the women came, yes, the men came, but says Chedush Arim, the men were on a higher level than the women at this point because they did teshuvah. That's so amazing. Like I said, it's so simple. We've quoted this Chazal over and over again in so many different contexts, and yet it's right there. Anyway, he says more on that. You can look at the source at your own opportunity. All right. Next piece, and really kind of the last piece for today. The Bezalel, we know, was inspired by Hashem. He was given a Ruach HaKodesh. He was given not only the authority, but also the ability and the talent and the correct intentions and everything to build the Beit HaMikdash, to build the Mishkan. Sorry. Halavai. And when he starts building it, he's able to do it with all the right intent, with all the right prophecy, with all the right everything else, spiritually, physically, mentally, psychologically, all there, right? And the pasuk that describes him, that he was filled with Ruach Elokim, it says in 35:31. Then in this verse, 35:32, it says, "V'lachshov machshavot la'asot bezav v'kesef v'anachoshet." He was given the ability, he was inspired to know the machshavot, to know the thoughts, to know the intent, to know the reason, the meaning behind all the things he was doing with the gold, with the silver, with the copper, specifically the metals. Why all these metals? Why all these materials? This, like I said, it's kind of a conclusion because, in a sense, this is the general overarching question we've always had about the Mishkan. Why do we need to have stuff? Hashem wants a holy place. Let him designate it. Why do I need to use wood, gold, stones? Use your magical godly laser beam and mark a spot and say, yeah, your Shekhinah's there. Good, fine. Have a cloud over it. Do I need to build something? What are all these materials? What is the point of this? So says the Malbim. Says the Malbim. Amar. He said, as Hashem is saying, Ki chutz m'mashe yasa B'Tzalel v'Haliyav, besides what B'Tzalel and Aliyav actually do, O Yachol Alehem Ruach HaKodesh. They were also given a separate Ruach HaKodesh, a separate ability, prophetic ability, the having kavanot hamalacha, to know the intent of the work, the sodoteha, and the secrets, v'chol hanirmaz ba, and everything that it hints to. If you look at all the commentaries, and we've had some commentaries in the last few parshiot, and we'll have, God willing, in the future years, lots of commentaries, lots of Kabbalistic and simple, Musar, ethical, all kinds of different explanations of what everything in the Mishkan symbolized. And the crux of this whole issue is that B'Tzalel and Oholiav knew all of these opinions, knew all of these commentaries. And they had all of this intent while they were building the Mishkan. It was part of it. That's what it means in this phrase that we have in this verse, ladat lasot, to know, to do. They knew what they were doing. Right? The whole time, they knew the machshavot, they knew all the workings, they knew exactly what they were doing. V'shiyasu kfi shetzava Hashem shekulal. They did exactly as Hashem commanded, im asecha l'shem shemayim, and they did it l'shem shemayim, im kavanot hasodot v'ta'alumot hamalacha. And they knew all of the secrets and the mysteries of the work. They knew everything that was going on. They knew exactly why they were using, what they were using, and what everything meant. Now we don't. I don't know what every single symbol in the Mishkan was. Why the tapestries were made this color, or what materials were being used, or what it symbolized. I don't know everything. Like I said, I've read different Perushim. There's the Malbim, there's Rav Hirsch, there's Rabbeinu Bachya, there's the Ramban. Right? You'll find lots of commentaries explaining what all of these things mean. There's the Rambam, as we saw a few weeks ago. But what is very, very important in understanding all of this is you need to know that B'Tzalel knew all of these commentaries. He knew the Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch wasn't alive yet. He wouldn't be alive for another, 3,000 years or so, right? 3,200 years, whatever it was. So, but he knew what Rav Hirsch would write. He knew all of the kavanot, all of the intents, all of the mysteries of everything that was being done in the Mishkan was all very clear for B'Tzalel and Oholiav. And that's how they built it, and that's why they built it the way they did, and that's why all of these things need to be repeated, as I've said before, because we need to know that all of this was done with kavanah. All of this was done with intent. Intent is very important. There's a whole argument that goes throughout Shas, throughout the entire Talmud, about whether or not a mitzvah done without kavanah, whether it counts or not. Mitzvot, whether mitzvot tzrichim kavanah or not, is one of the famous arguments throughout the entire Talmud. There is no final conclusion to this topic, by the way. It's still a little bit shrouded in mystery. But what you need to know is that the people who built this Mishkan knew exactly what they were doing with every single material, with every single size, and with every single action that they performed. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank